Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we look at the Captain General Trajann Valoris. I feel he's in the shadow of Constantine Valdor a lot. I wanted to know more about his exploits, so let's take a look at how he earned his position within the Adeptus Custodes. Trajann is a naturally aggressive individual that also has a strong grasp of strategy on the battlefield. This gained him a place in the EARNS Custodians, whose job it is to find and kill key figures in an enemy's army. He won much acclaim with them, removing Xenos cults of gene stealers and making a preemptive strike against a dangerous warg. But through this, he did have one weakness. He never wanted to stand back and let enemies come to him. Within the Alos ranks, he lasted for 22 years, a short time in the life of a Custodes, and it was clear he wanted to fight in a more proactive style of defence, and he was assigned to a role perhaps where he was set free to fight how he wanted, and he gained the rank of a shield captain, and there at home spent several centuries fighting against emergent threats. Within the Sol system, this built a reputation for him in how he could read his enemies when they attacked, and based on that, predict how they moved. He only had to wait for a finishing blow to be delivered. So, to aid him in fighting these emergent threats, he established agents and informers around the Sol system and even out into the wider Imperium. But Trajann had the self-awareness to know about his own weakness, his aggressive action, and tempered this using foreknowledge, which he acquired through studying his enemies and learning things from his agents. With these, he was able to improve himself, to only strike when he should, and to not lose comrades due to his aggressive actions. During the War of the Beast, when a strangely intelligent attack by orcs threatened the Imperium, Trajann assumed a seat with the High Lords of Terror. The Chancellor, who brought him in, wanted him to serve as a High Lord. This would help with the Lex Imperialis. This was a binding legal code of the Imperium. Perhaps a modern term for it would be red tape, and it stopped the Custodes learning that they could leave terror en masse to fight chaos when it threatened. That is not how things play out, but it does come back into this tale later. In M41, during a period dubbed the Age of Madness, omens at the time engulfed terror. The Custodes ruled by Gelhoth had fallen into stagnation, and worse, the Captain General himself disappeared. The influence of cults grew deeper, and it's into this climate of paranoia Trajann Valoris is elevated to command of the 10,000. And a short side discussion, Erda, the genetic mother of the Primarchs, in the Siege of Terror series, tells us that the Emperor employs a lot of historical myth to aid his own myth and how he is perceived. And so, thinking on this, the Persian Empire in ancient terror had a group of warriors called the Immortals, who were said to always number 10,000. And I wonder if that might be a historical allusion that the Emperor has added to his Custodes here. Something else they share is that they also guarded the leader of their empire. Anyway, picking up from before, Valoris takes command and makes efforts to regain control of Earth's defences. As part of this, the Custodes increase their actions, both covert and martial. Many of the cults that have built up are cold. A dangerous Xenos is removed from a void fortress on Pluto, and 32 extra solar strikes are also made. 17 other Captain Generals had come before him, the first being Valdor. Most died in fighting for their Emperor, on Terra itself or out amongst the stars. Some have taken roles as eyes of the Emperor, essentially retiring from their posts, but operating as a spy for the Custodes, and 3, like Valdor, have simply vanished. Another mark of his qualification was that, with only a solar decade of service to the Custodes, Valoris had run through 2 successful blood games. This record still remains. The blood games are ways the Custodes examine their own defences by having other Custodes infiltrate and test them, now under Trajann, and perhaps knowing its importance after his 2 successful attempts. The blood games have been increased tenfold. In addition, any stable warp routes an enemy might use have had their defences strengthened, and cults that have long been able to thrive on Terra itself in the Underhives have been purged. Later, when the Great Rift opened, the Immaterium swept over the galaxy and reached Terra. Demons were allowed to spoil the hallowed soil of Earth, and so a fight happened at the Lion's Gate. Valoris acted as commander of the forces on Earth. He led 4,000 Custodes to the gate to meet these invaders, and there he fought alongside Rabute, who had returned, and together they ended the Blood God's attempt to reach for Earth and turn it into his skull throne. And it was then something monumental happened. The High Lords voted to suspend the Lex Imperialis, and the Custodes were allowed to go out into the wider galaxy to fight for the Emperor, sometimes working with the Sisterhood of Silence, as they had long ago, and aiding Rabute and his Indomitus crusade. Now before we go, let's look at two weapons the Captain General deploys. The first is something from the Dark Age of technology, which is always a topic I'm drawn to, and is dubbed the Moment Shackle. And with this, Valdor can trap fragments of temporal energy and use them to remove split-second events from history, like perhaps a penetrating strike on his armor. Or he can also use them to slow time, to overcome enemies that threaten him. Perhaps if he's surrounded, he can use this moment to get around and defeat those attacking him. And the other weapon I'd like to cover in brief is the Misericordia. In High Gothic, it's called the Blade of Mercy, and it's a dagger or short sword carried by Custodes. After the heresy, the blade represented the Magisterium Lex Ultima, which states that they are placed beyond the reach of imperial law and answer only to the Master of Mankind. The weapon itself could deal a single killing blow and could be used to offer something dubbed the Emperor's Peace if someone was mortally wounded. Again, going back to ancient terror, the knife was used by knights during the Middle Ages and had a very similar name. And the name of that blade in Latin was translated to Act of Mercy and was used for the same reason as the Custodes, but between one knight and another. The blade was thin and could penetrate armour to give the Mercy Stroke, or Emperor's Peace, as it's dubbed in M40. Very, very similar. And that, friends, is where I will end today's video and my attempt to give a little glory to the Captain General of the Custodes, Trajann Valoris.